Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. History is not the friend of climate alarmists. Malcolm X said during the 1960s, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and make the guilty innocent. Here's an article from The Guardian 10 years ago this week discussing a congressional hearing about global warming. The title of the article is, Democrats Roll Out Climate Change Big Guns, Republicans Remain Immune. Climate hearing appears to fail to sway Republicans before Thursday's vote on curbing Obama's green ambitions. You might remember that 12 years ago, Joe Biden and Barack Obama promised to create 5 million green jobs. The jobs never materialized, but Biden and Obama did succeed in creating a lot of green energy scandals. They gave away billions of dollars of taxpayer money to their cronies who created fake green energy companies. These companies inevitably failed, but we can be pretty sure that Biden and Obama got their kickbacks. Neither Joe Biden nor Barack Obama have ever held a real job, but they've gotten extremely rich on civil servants' salaries. Anyway, let's go back to the Guardian article from 10 years ago. The press and Democrats were very angry at Republicans for resisting Barack Obama and Joe Biden's green energy plans. California Congressman Henry Waxman said, "If my doctor told me I had cancer, I wouldn't scour the country to find someone to tell me that I don't need to worry about it. Most of us don't substitute our own judgment for that of experts when it comes to medicine, nuclear engineering, building bridges, or designing computer security." And The Guardian added, Tuesday's hearing heard from 4 recognized climate scientists as well as 3 well-known climate skeptics. So according to The Guardian, climate skeptics are not scientists. Let's take a look at who the 3 climate skeptics on the panel were. The first skeptic was Dr. John Christie from the University of Alabama at Huntsville. Dr. Christie is one of the most distinguished scientists in the meteorological and climate world. His list of accomplishments is quite impressive. I'm not going to read them to you, but you can read through them yourself if you'd like. Dr. Christie is the Alabama state climatologist. The second skeptic was Dr. Roger Pielke Sr. from the University of Colorado. Dr. Pielke also has a very impressive list of accomplishments, including being the Colorado state climatologist from 1999 to 2006. And the third skeptic was Dr. Donald R. Roberts, who's one of the leading health authorities in the United States. In his testimony, he refuted the hysterical claims made by Democrats that carbon dioxide is affecting people's health. Democrats in the press don't acknowledge that these leading experts are scientists because they don't say the things which Democrats in the press want to hear. By contrast, Democrats in the press do get their science from people like Greta Thunberg, Leo DiCaprio, Bill Nye, and Al Gore. None of these people are scientists, but they say what Democrats and the press want to hear. Democrat Jay Inslee is currently the governor of Washington, but he was in Congress 10 years ago, and he lamented at the hearing that even if Copernicus, Galileo, Newton, and Einstein were testifying, Republicans would still not accept the science until Antarctica had melted. So apparently this is Copernicus, Galileo, Isaac Newton, and Albert Einstein. And as far as Antarctica melting goes, Antarctic sea ice extent hit a record high 3 years after the hearing and currently is near a record high for the date. Curie just published this graph showing 40 years of East Antarctic cooling on Pierre Gosselin's no-trick zone. The Democrats' witnesses at the 2011 hearing came armed with the latest evidence. Newton Adelhofer, a University of Michigan professor, noted that Lake Superior had already warmed 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit since 1979. Wow, that sounds bad. Lake Superior must really be burning up. Let's take a look at the data. This graph from NOAA shows Lake Superior water temperatures from 1995 to the present. You can see that current temperatures are just about average, and the temperatures peaked in 2012, 1 year after the congressional hearing. There's no evidence that Lake Superior is warming up, and why did he pick his start year in 1979? Let's take a look at U.S. January temperatures over the last century. 1979 was the coldest January on record, and 1978 and 1977 were also extremely cold. In fact, January 1977 was so cold that it snowed in Miami. That's the only time that's happened. If we look at winter temperatures in the states surrounding the Great Lakes, we can see that 1977, 1978, and 1979 were three of the 5 coldest winters of the last century. And this graph from NOAA shows maximum ice coverage on the Great Lakes from 1973 to 2020. Not surprisingly, ice coverage was very high on the Great Lakes in 1977, 1978, and 1979 because those winters were extremely cold. But they had similar ice coverage in 2014, 2015, and 2018 and 2019 also had very high ice coverage. This year isn't shown on the graph, but during the very cold weather last month, it was just below average. So the Democrats' expert cherry-picked a high start date and cherry-picked a low end date. This is the sort of scientific fraud I've come to expect from climate alarmists, the press, and Democrats. Before I finish up, let's look at a few other examples of climate idiocy from alarmists and the press. In 1995, the New York Times predicted that most of the beaches on the East Coast would be gone by the year 2020. And apparently this didn't happen because Barack Obama just bought a $15 million home on an East Coast beach. Being a civil servant apparently pays really well these days. Here's another classic from the BBC. In 1989, the United Nations identified Tuvalu in the South Pacific as one of a number of islands likely to be swallowed by the sea in the 21st century. The island's 12,000 residents are subsequently facing the very real prospect of having to abandon their homes. But as it turns out, Tuvalu is actually getting larger. A University of Auckland study examined changes in the geography of Tuvalu's 9 atolls and 101 reef islands between 1971 and 2014. The Pacific island of Tuvalu, long seen as a prime candidate to disappear as climate change forces up sea levels, is actually growing in size. The United Nations also predicted in 1989 that the Maldives would drown within 30 years, but instead of drowning, they've been building lots of new airports. And around the same time in 1988 or 1989, the world's leading climate alarmist, Dr. James Hansen, who started the global warming scare before Congress, predicted that Lower Manhattan would drown within 30 years. But no worries, I just checked the Lower Manhattan webcam and it appears that Lower Manhattan is still above water. And here's another great forecast from James Hansen from 1985. He predicted 7 degrees Celsius warming in the tropical troposphere. And here's the latest University of Alabama at Huntsville tropical lower troposphere temperature anomaly graph. Temperatures in the tropical troposphere are currently lower now than they were in 1980 and much lower than they were in 1998. Hansen's predicted 7 degrees warming in the tropical troposphere simply hasn't occurred. What actually controls tropical troposphere temperatures are surface temperatures of the Pacific Ocean. This is a graph showing El Niño and La Niña events since 1990. El Niño events are associated with warm Pacific Ocean temperatures, and La Niña events are associated with cold Pacific Ocean temperatures. Now let's overlay the Niño graph on top of the tropical troposphere temperature graph. The Niño graph is shown in transparent pink, and the tropical troposphere temperatures are shown in blue. It's pretty clear that tropical troposphere temperatures are controlled by oceanic circulation patterns and not carbon dioxide as James Hansen claimed in 1985. Democrats in the press reject legitimate science and cling to junk science because it suits their political agenda. Voltaire said, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." And that's exactly what Democrats are doing. Since the fake election last November, crude oil prices have nearly doubled. Joe Biden promised to shut down U.S. energy production, and OPEC was listening. High energy prices are the most regressive tax on the poor and the middle class. Democrats pretend that they care about the poor and middle class when in fact they're crushing them. The people whom Democrats call scientists are actually political hacks, and the people whom Democrats write off as skeptics are the real scientists. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this junk science for the past 13 years. You can visit him and Curie on the web at realclimatescience.com. And Curie also blogs on Pierre Gosselin's No Tricks Zone.